afternoon, and I am so glad that we're all here. And I am sorry that I joined a minute or two late, but really just again want to thank everybody. And this is our first time back together, I think, after the retreat. So again, want to just thank the time that people spent giving us their hearts and their minds and their thoughts at the retreat. And really exciting as we have two new members that we want to introduce today that are joining us. And we don't want to overwhelm, but we are thrilled that they are in this room with us today. And so first person I want to introduce is Dr. Marion Harris. And Dr. Harris has joined the board as an expert in reducing disparities in child outcome by race, income, and ethnicity. She is both nationally and internationally recognized as a child welfare researcher who has published numerous journal articles, reports, and also the book Racial Disproportionality in Child Welfare. And there's a current second edition in progress. And I've got that one now in my list to read. Her latest book, Children of Incarcerated Parents, Silent Victims, was published in 2023 by Cambridge Scholars Publishing. And Dr. Harris is currently Professor Emerita at the UW-Tacoma School of Social Work and Criminal Justice. And welcome, Dr. Harris. We're incredibly excited to have you as a new board member. And then the next exciting person I want to introduce is Pamela Javier. And I see you there. And Pamela has joined at the board as a member representing youth with previous experience in foster care. Pamela aspires to work with youth and adolescents involved in the child welfare system and is currently pursuing a bachelor's degree in sociology at Washington State University. Go Cougs. To further this goal, I just had to say that because I'm a cougar in the room. Pamela's passion for helping youth began in 2020 when she joined the co-design workshop sessions with the Department of Children, Youth, and Families. And most recently, she served as an advocate and voted on Washington administrative codes during the Group Care Negotiated Rulemaking Project as a representative of the Lived Youth Experience Group. Additionally, Pamela presented alongside Think of Us for the Washington State Vision for the Future report in 2022. Outside of work, Pamela loves spending time with her family. She loves hiking, fishing, making art, and singing. And we will not ask you to sing today, but maybe someday we will benefit from that. I just want to welcome you, Pamela, as well. Thrilled to have you here as a board member and part of our oversight board. And the same thing, Dr. Harris. Welcome both of you today, and this is us, and now you are part of us. So with that, I'm going to pass it on to Lisha.
Thank you, Senator Wilson, and I just want to echo your enthusiasm. I am very excited that Dr. Harris and Pamela Javier have joined the board. We are absolutely thrilled. So without further ado, I'm going to do roll call, and we'll start. Katie Byron. She mentioned that she would be joining late. Bobby Bridge. Okay. Representative Tom Dent.
Dent's here.
Wonderful. Dr. Ben DeHaan.
Present.
Thank you. Dr. Harris. I heard you say present. Welcome. Pamela Javier.
Present.
Thank you. Daniel Johnson.
Present.
Ruth Kagi.
Present, and I have no idea why my camera doesn't work.
You know, it happens to the best of us.
But I'm here.
Wonderful. We're glad you're here. Dr. Levy.
I'm here.
Lois Martin.
Here.
Thank you. Rep. Sen. Barbara Serrano, who told me she would be joining late, and Senator Warnick.
I'm here.
Great. Nice to see you. And then Senator Wilson.
I'm here too.
Wonderful. Well, it's great to see you all here. I think we will move on in our agenda to approval of the minutes. So I would like to request that the board consider approval of the October 18, 2024 minutes. Does anyone have any edits or feedback to the minutes? Okay, so is there a motion to approve these minutes?
I motion to approve.
Wonderful. All in favor, say aye.
I
Aye.
think we need a second first.
Oh,
Vice-
thank you,
Second.
Dr. Levy.
Ruth
just heard-
seconds.
Wonderful. Okay. Thank you for calling that out. All in favor, please say aye now.
Aye.
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 With that, the minutes are approved. So we kind of got a little bit of housekeeping out of the way, but I'm excited that you all are here today as we will be going over our annual report. I will be sharing my screen throughout pretty much this entire process, and I'm just going to start that now. Okay, and I will get organized and bump some things up for everyone. Can everyone see that? Yes, I see thumbs up. That's wonderful. And I am going to move everyone into gallery view, which makes it a little bit easier for me to see you. Thank you for your patience. Okay, so as a researcher and a program evaluator, this is one of my favorite quotes, and I thought this might be a nice way to start our conversation about the annual report. And that is, if you can't measure it, you can't improve it. We are in a great position where we have a lot of very robust and valid data that we can make some conclusions from, and just wanting to acknowledge that as we start today. I also want to say, this report was produced in what I would call record time. So for today, I do have a couple of requests as it relates to our process. So I'm going to share those now. So some things that I think could be very helpful for the board to consider as we discuss the annual report is being as high level as possible and really focusing on recommendations. I think just with respect to being efficient, I think if we can, it would be helpful to avoid wordsmithing. And then I want to put out an idea that it may be the case that we'll need a one-time ad hoc group of volunteers to work on getting to a final version. I don't know where we'll be at the end of this call, but I just wanted to mention that. Before I go into a couple notes, are there any questions about process or anything I can clarify? Okay. So just some notes before I share the report on my screen. Just want to let you know that since you've received the report, some of the statistics have been updated, and you will note that in the report by my track changes. You'll see some things in red, and so I just want to call that to your attention. Also, something that I've been thinking about, and this is something that we can also discuss as we walk our way through the report, is that I'm wondering if it would be helpful to have a threshold for what no change means. And for example, if there's a change of 3% or less, maybe we don't consider that change. Obviously, one measure does not equal another measure, and so we might need to rely on some contextual factors, but I'm just putting that as like a bug in your ear. And then you'll notice in the report, there's the language worse, like outcomes are worse than the year prior. And that will be changed to needs improvement, and that change is in process. So I will share the report now. Okay. And I'm going to get us to the beginning, and then I will adjust the font in just a moment. Okay. Let's adjust this a little bit. Can people read this? Does it need to be larger?
think that's good. And I was just thinking, Elisha, before you jump in, it might be helpful, especially to our two members, to just give them a little heads up on what this report, eh, how it worked, why we do it, why it's in the statute. Maybe just give us a little quick blurb on that, if you could.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. Levy, for suggesting that. I'm going to kind of respond to that. And then Lois, I also see your hand. So part of our role as an oversight board is to really ensure and monitor DCYF achieves its stated outcomes. And we're really invested in their success. And in our statute, we actually have it written that we produce an annual report that actually goes to the legislature by December 1. We will not be making that deadline this year, unfortunately, but we're trying to get as close as we can to it. Also, the 18 overall outcome measures are in our statute. So they were decided on, in 2017. If you go to our revised Code of Washington, you will see these outcome measures. Now, some of the performance indicators, that level of detail that are underneath the outcomes, those are not part of the statute, but the overall outcome is. I would just welcome anyone, including new members, to ask any questions throughout. I'm relatively new. I think I'm in month 3, but this is definitely an education process for me as well. So does Lois, do you have still, Dr. Harris? Okay, no question.
Oh, I was putting my glasses on.
You're preparing. I see something in the chat. Before, it would be nice to hear something from the 2 new board members. Senator Wilson forgot to give them time to speak. So I was just reading Lois's comment in the chat. If you would like to take a few moments to share, and introduce yourself, you are more than welcome to do that. Also, I know we're very limited on time, and if you just want to observe today, for the entire board to know, we actually have not done orientation for our new members yet. So typically they would meet with me and Nicholas, and we would walk through the board, its procedures, its processes, and really do some grounding. And I know in some of the emails that I've had with both Dr. Harris and Pamela, there has been some requests just to remain a little bit more passive today, since it is the first meeting, but I will absolutely give the opportunity. Dr. Harris, do you have anything you'd like to share, since this is your first board meeting, not to put you on the spot?
I'm happy to be here. And I'm in the midst of reading this report on my own. I think I'm probably about halfway through it.
That is wonderful. I think you received it like everyone else 2 days ago. So really appreciate
Yes.
those efforts. Yes. And as I said in my email, that will not be business as usual. So really, really glad you're here, Dr. Harris, and you're a member on this board.
Thank you. I'm pleased to be here.
Wonderful. Pamela, would you like to say hello or share anything briefly?
Yes, I'd love to. I am very grateful to be here with all the other members. I am also halfway reading through the documents as well, so sorry about that. I try to get through as much as I can along with my workload of school, so it's a bit hectic for me. But yeah, I'm just really happy to be here, and if I do have any questions, I am the type of person that will speak up and ask, and really looking forward to see what we do in these meetings. As you can tell, I really just like being part of the community and helping out with the youth, even youth who aren't in the system. Any way I can help, I'm there to help out. So thank you all for this opportunity.
And thank you. We are thrilled that you are both here. So, and thank you for taking just a few moments, and Lois for calling that out, because I think it was lovely that they were able to share a little bit. And then I also want to just quickly say that this is not a typical board meeting. In my experience, or from what I've watched a lot of the videos from past board meetings. Going over an annual report like this very systematically is not something that is traditionally done. So it's an interesting way to start as your first board meeting, but I just want you to know that this is not so typical. So I'm going to direct everyone's attention to the executive summary. And I just want to note that this is pretty standard text. There are some things that after we review the report, we might want to go back and decide what we want to call out. Based on the retreat and some of the things that discussed, I lifted up supporting the workforce, as that seems to be really a strong interest of the board. And so that was in the 2022 report that Krista produced. So really stayed similar to her language, but that is totally up for discussion about whether or not it makes sense to include this, or to what extent it's included or excluded for that matter. And then, of course, I talked about addressing disproportionality and disparities, because I know that is central to all the work that we do and the work that DCYF does. I want to let you know that when writing the report, I followed what the former executive director did, and her name is Krista, for those who are new. I essentially looked at change from the most recent year for which we had data to the year prior to that. So I also tried to provide data starting in 2017. 2017 is the year that DCYF was founded. However, it wasn't fully up and running until about 2018, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong. So we can just kind of have a benchmark and look and see what was happening prior to it being fully operational. And then juvenile rehabilitation did not join DCYF until 2019, I believe. And that's right there on the page. So based on the data and just my interpretation, we see achievements improvements in quite a few areas. So I just want to call those out right now. Increasing the number and proportion of children kindergarten ready as measured by WAKIDS assessment. Reducing the number of children entering out-of-home care. Reducing the length of stay in out-of-home care. Licensing more foster homes than there are children in foster care. Increasing stability of placements for children in out-of-home care. And then reducing discharge of youth from institutional settings into homelessness. So that is what the data, my interpretation of the data showed. And then the report also indicates areas where there are need for improvements. And I'll just briefly go through these here, as I know you can see them on the page for yourself as well. Areas for improvement that I saw: increasing the available supply of licensed childcare in childcare centers and family homes, including providers not receiving subsidies. Reducing child and youth maltreatment while in out-of-home care. Reducing the number of children re-entering out-of-home care within 12 months. Increasing family reunification. Reducing future demand for mental health and substance use disorder treatment for youth involved in child welfare and juvenile justice systems. And decreasing the number of youth who commit subsequent crimes. And then there were so we have these 18 outcomes. And underneath the outcomes, we have these performance indicators. And there are some times where we have multiple performance indicators per outcome, which I think is very helpful. But looking at the data, oftentimes we'll see an improvement in one indicator, and then perhaps no change or a decline in another indicator. So I call that mixed. And so we had mixed results for these particular outcomes, and I'll just go through them now. So mixed findings for reducing racial and ethnic disproportionality and disparities in system involvement across child and youth outcomes in collaboration with other state agencies. Preventing child abuse and neglect. Developing strategies to show foster and kinship care families that their service and involvement are valued by DCYF. Collaborating with county juvenile justice programs to improve adolescent outcomes. And finally, increasing the number of youth who successfully complete diversion programs or alternative sentencing options in collaboration with county juvenile justice programs. I'll open it up for questions in just a moment, but I do want to highlight here that we saw virtually no change in one of the outcomes, and that was the proportion of children in early learning programs who achieved a level 3 or higher on the early achievers quality standard. And we'll look at that a little bit more closely, but you will see that there are a dramatic number of providers that are not rated there. Then in the executive summary, we talked about at the retreat really uplifting some of the successes that Secretary Hunter and DCYF staff have accomplished since the start of DCYF, and that's a part and due to his departure at the end of imminent departure once he has a replacement. And so I've called some of these out here because they are absolutely notable. So I kind of made that front and center. And it's a little different than the rest of the report because it really looks at from 2017 to present. But I think that's useful. And then I talk about DCYF Oversight Board background, and then mention the board member service. We've had since 2022, we've had two board members leave, and so I acknowledge that. Ruth, I see your hand.
Two things on childcare. There has been a very significant increase in the number of licensed providers that shows up in the tables. So I just think that's worth checking. And then on the board members, there were two other board members, Chris Loeffler from WFC and Lonnie Greninger from the tribe, who is a tribal representative who served the entire term and retired. So it would be nice to acknowledge them as well.
Absolutely. I really appreciate you calling that out. I believe Charles was acknowledged in the 2022 report, which is why I didn't acknowledge him here, but I think that makes sense. And I will get their exact spellings of their names from our records, but I really appreciate you calling that out. I want to make sure that their service is highlighted.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Senator Wilson, I saw your hand.
So are we just at a place for questions, or where?
Yes, this is. Yep, before we dive into the summary table, I think this is a great time.
Okay, so if you go back up to the childcare piece, so right there between the virtually no change, it's not children who achieve level 3. That's the quality rating improvement system. So that's about the program itself and the pieces of the program. It's not about kids. So just want to make sure that's clear.
Would you,
that makes sense?
Yes. Would you suggest providers or what language?
Well, correct. Because it's the providers that go through the quality rating improvement system. It has nothing to do developmentally with any level of any child. It's about our quality system, which is early achievers. So yeah, it's about providers and individuals.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was reading that. I'm like, yeah, that's the answer. So, because I was like, wait a second, I'm confused. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. Bobby.
Yes, hi. Sorry, I have my nit to pick here. If you go back a little bit more, and I can't remember what this section was called, but the last thing, the last thing, the last bullet point on the section that is bolded as this report indicates the improvements are needed for. Last one, decreasing the number of youth who commit subsequent crimes. Subsequent to what?
Right. So I think it's talking about recidivism.
All right. So that's release from what? State care? State not detention, but state custody?
That's a great question. I don't, that's my understanding from JR.
I think that's probably right. And maybe it is too nittish, but I think it should be clarified.
Yep. I can confirm that.
Thanks.
Thank you for calling that out. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
Any other questions before we look at the summary table? And I'm only able to see so many people in gallery mode. So I think if your hand is raised, you are bumped to the top of my queue for gallery mode. But if you are raising your hand, you just let me know. And I do see Dr. Levy.
Well, that just reminds me that we're supposed to be going by first names, but we always slip back, don't we?
We do, we do.
Anyway, so I was just going to say it might be helpful. You managed to give us a little bit of a definition of what your mixed findings and your improvements and areas that need improvement, but it might be helpful to have those definitions somewhere close to the top for the readers so they understand what that means, that what kind of definition you're using.
Absolutely. Thank you for calling that out. I'm in complete agreement. And I see we have another raised hand. So Sylvia Alexander. So I don't think that's a board member, but perhaps there's a different name.
It is not a board member.
Oh, okay. Okay. So there will be time for the public to talk during public comment. And I believe that is starting at 4:30 this afternoon. And one way to do that is by letting Nicholas know via email. And he can put his email in the chat that you'd like to participate. And that would be a great time to share. So, okay. Before we go to the summary table, any other questions or comments? Yes, Ben.
It's sort of a process question. I mean, our purposes today are to refine a report. I'm assuming to get that over the transom to the people who need it. But will we have an opportunity at some point to talk about the limitations of some of the metrics that were actually referenced in statute? Because some of them are incompatible with one another. Others don't give us any real basis of saying it's positive. I don't want to monopolize the time now, but I think if we have an opportunity to talk about the individual metrics, their value, and what we would substitute or augment them with in future reports, is that the subject of an entirely different meeting?
Great question. I think talking about limitations of measures is important in that the recommendations that will come from the board are derived from the findings that we are taking from these measures. So I think that's appropriate. If we find that we're getting too into the weeds, I would love any, written comment or, maybe having an ad hoc meeting. But I do think acknowledging, the limitations is pretty critical, right? Because it's important for everyone's interpretation. So thank you for raising that. And your hand is still raised, but I have a feeling it might just be up. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to scroll down here to this summary table, and the summary table is different than what you've seen in last year's and previous years. So I want to highlight it. So what we have in the grade section are the overall outcomes. So those 18 outcomes that are in statute, that's what you're seeing here highlighted. And the measures that you see below are the performance indicators. Unlike the previous report where sometimes information wasn't presented because there weren't data available, I opted to include data for the most recent years. So you'll see there are some instances where we may actually go back to 2021 to get the most recent data. That's pretty unusual. I think 2022 is the furthest we go back, but we'll look and see that. So we do have something to talk about. That was my decision in writing this. I wanted to have something to kind of reflect on the outcome itself. And then what is different about this table also is I actually, and this is something that I'm open to feedback on, is I have actually provided ratings on the indicator at the indicator level. So what you saw on that second page, I believe, where I said, you know, there were improvements in these areas. There needs to be improvement in these areas, and then these findings were mixed. That was at the higher level. So that was at the level of the outcome measure. It was not at the level of the performance indicator. And I did that in part because I wasn't sure about how these would roll up. But it turns out they do roll up quite nicely. So one thing that the board can talk about now, or maybe perhaps later, is if it would be clearer just to have an overall rating here. My concern is about the different years and mixing apples and oranges, and I think it's nice to have this level of specificity for clarity, but I just want to point out that this is different.
What's SFY?
Thank you. So that's state fiscal year.
Thank you.
And
Okay.
then you're going to see SY, which is school year, and those are noted at the end of the table. But you know, I'm open to putting in like a footnote so people can see it on the same page. But yeah, keep asking those questions. Okay, footnote. Okay, I'm just going to jot that down. Same page. And then Ruth, I see your hand is raised.
Thank you. Well, I just on the starting out with the system involvement, it wasn't clear to me if we were talking about JR. I think 30-day room confinement is obviously related to JR, correct?
Yes.
So I think there needs to be some clarity about that. And I don't know. I'm wondering if we should start out with the early learning indicators, then the child welfare indicators, and then the JJ indicators. Just for clarity and kind of logical sequence.
That makes a lot of sense to me. Krista actually started with the former executive director with looking at race and ethnic differences, but she didn't provide data for that. But I think that it's not a logical sequence, right? We were starting with the little kiddos and families, and then working our way through the age span. I think that makes a lot of sense. That sounds good to me, Ruth.
It would also show the absence of prevention. Just saying, it would be helpful.
Yes. So I'm going to make a note to myself about changing the order. I appreciate that comment. Thank you.
Well, and making clear that first item is related to JR.
Yes. And then this needs to be clarified. Oh, I need to have you in track changes. If you guys will excuse me for just a moment. Okay. Sorry about that.
Elisha, would it be helpful if one of us tried to call on people while you're trying to write notes?
Yes, it's just in the interest of time. Yes, thank you. I appreciate your process mind. Yes, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Okay. And I only see my hand right now. And I did have a comment, but so maybe if I'm not calling on you, maybe people could just jump in because I only see about 6 people on my screen. Okay. The comment I was going to make is the way that this is set up is you have this as kind of the higher level summary table, and then you go in and you break everything down with all of the information to follow. So I'm just wondering for people, does that feel like, do we need a little more explanation of that? Or does that seem intuitive to folks? In other words, like we were talking about this, you know, you were mentioning this is a JR reference. Well, if you go down to the text, it's clear that that's what it is. So I don't know if that would help make things more, or maybe this follows, or I don't know. I just wanted to pose that to the group.
It's a great question. Not seeing any hands raised, but I think it might make sense to actually start to get into the outcomes as you're suggesting, and but you know, also and afterwards coming back to this and making sure that it's really clear, because you know what, a lot of people are just going to look at this table, so making sure that it's really crisp and people know exactly what we're talking about. And Ruth, I can see your camera's on. That's great. But you may be on mute. So what I'm now doing is I'm scrolling, and I'm going to get us to the first measure. And I'm actually going to keep us in the order just for time. I'm not going to bump us to early learning right now, but that's the decision that's been made, is that we're not going to start with racial equity and disproportionality. We are going to start more with early learning. So just elevating that. So right now we are looking at the overall outcome is eliminate racial and ethnic disproportionality and disparities in system involvement and across child and youth outcomes in collaboration with other state agencies. So these are the data that DCYF are tracking currently, and we actually have some data that actually have not been produced publicly yet. We have some 2024 data. So this particular measure right here, which is 30-day room confinement isolation by race ethnicity. And we're looking at state fiscal year 2017 to 2024. And then I just want to highlight, because I think it's really important, I have background in quite a few sections where I make some definitions. So for example, here, room confinement isolation rates represent the average number of days juvenile rehabilitation clients spend in room confinement / isolation per 30 days. And so what you'll see here is this is broken out by these racial and ethnic groups. And so this is not like an index. This is really days. That's the value you're looking at here. And so I rated this overall as mixed. We see, if I'm just going to direct your attention, and when I say mixed, and this I think would be helpful to have in the introduction section, I'm looking at for the 2 most recent years. So I'm looking at the change from 2023 to 2024. And, you know, we're seeing that there was an increase for American Indian, Alaska Native, youth and young adults. And then this is the first time that this measure, we looked at that Asian Pacific Islander youth were looked at as a group. That was in 2024, so we're not able to do a comparison. But there was an increase in days for Black African American youth. You know, it went from a 1 to a 1.13. So just noticing that there, calling that out. And then you can see that it went down for Hispanic Latino youth. And it also went down for white youth. And, you know, something that I think is going to be helpful while we're reviewing this, and we may need some time to read. And so if people, you know, would like, you know, a minute or two to read, to wrap their head around the text, I'm absolutely fine providing that time, especially since the report was sent so late. But, you know, I do keep thinking about those recommendations. Senator Wilson.
Okay, here's where I'm going to out myself right here. So, is this juvenile solitary?
I believe so.
Okay, so I did a bill. So I'm wondering, we did a bill and I didn't come into the legislature until 2018. And so there was a bill that eliminated juvenile solitary confinement and in the juvenile system. And so I'm curious how this may align with, and we could chat offline or whatever, but if we're talking, is it room confinement or is it solitary confinement? Because if it's solitary, I would hope that we would show that we did something to change the law, right? And hopefully we would see changes in numbers. I don't know. And so I may be digging myself here, but I did the bill. So I just am wondering, is confinement, or is it around time in room versus time out? Or yeah, I may be going deeper, so we could chat off a line, but I just want to be clear on, because we had pandemic, there's all kinds of things within those numbers, within those years too, that would impact.
Absolutely.
things.
I
Anyway,
really appreciate that. Like,
I
how
don't
are
know
we
if that makes
defining this?
sense.
What are we
Okay.
actually talking about? Yes, that's a great question. And I need to know that as well. So thank you for raising that. Lois, I see your hand raised as well.
Yes, thank you, Laisha. I think, well, that we should take out the descriptive language like a slight increase or sharp decline, and just maybe put increase or decline and let folk determine on their own what they think it is. And I think that should be done throughout the document.
Let people determine the magnitude of the change.
Yes.
How, what do people, I'm just interested in other feedback on that as well, if anyone has any thoughts. Because it is a judgment, right? It is a judgment. Ruth, I see your hand raised.
It is a judgment, but I think people reading this do need some indication of what our assessment of it is. I mean, that's the purpose of the report. So, and I'm not sure they're going to look at 0.88 versus 0.76, that, you know, some evaluation on our part is valuable.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing that. Lois, I think your hand is still raised.
It is, because I was going to say again that I think that a person would be able to read that and say, you know, had an increase from 0.98. I think for me, and especially when it comes to our African-American children, that it minimizes the fact that the numbers are on the uptick, excuse me. And that is concerning to me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I hear you. Thank you for raising that. Yeah, it's hard, right? And I think this is something where we might want to come back to, you know, knowing that some people, you know, will need a little bit of help or a little bit of context, but, you know, when's that a judgment? And then also minimizing, you know, things for various groups where it probably isn't appropriate. Barb and Dr. Levy, I see two hands. I don't know who was first.
Go ahead, Barbara.
Thank you. Yeah, I also had a question regarding the definition of room confinement, and if we could actually find out, you know, is it number of hours? Is it 24 hours? Is it 12 hours? I think that's really important to know. And I also just wanted to clarify, Lisha, so if we use the example of, like, just go to the first row, the change for American Indian, Alaska Natives, so 1.40 to 1.77 between 2023 and 2024, is that 1.4 days out of
That's my
30
understanding.
days?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
It's a little difficult to interpret because we're going to the hundredths of a day. And so I guess I really wonder if we need to go to the hundredths when we're talking about a day.
I really appreciate that.
I'll just put that out there.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not natural. I agree.
Yeah, it's not natural. So anyway.
Thank you for sharing that and for asking to get a really clear, crisp definition. Dr. Levy.
Well, I guess I'm pondering the fact that this is, you know, obviously, because we're the oversight board and we need to look at how their matrices are run, we're at a high level and all of these measures are slightly different. And so I really appreciate that you're calling out what the actual measure is measuring. And then that goes back to Lois's question or thought that it does take some interpretation, but I do think there might be room to put in, instead of perhaps you, I'm just thinking about like a comment about an increase of 3% is considered to be significant, or, you know, when in medicine, we always talk about clinically significant versus, you know, borderline. So I don't know if it would be helpful to just sort of give people a sense of the scale per measure without getting overly involved. And Lisha, I know you had very little time to throw this all together. So maybe this is thinking ahead too a little bit. This may be too much to do right now, but I guess I'm wondering whether that might be something to consider in the future.
Yeah, I love the idea of having consistent rubrics. Absolutely. You know, significant is always hard for me to use because it has a very specific term, meaning, as you know. But I definitely hear you on that, and I'm jotting that down and do need some thought. And I see Ben, I see your hand.
Yeah, I'd just like to raise the issue of qualifying some of these measures again, because you have the effects of small cell sizes. If, for example, when you don't know how many subjects you're talking about here, large differences can mean an effect on one or two children, depending on the size in the population. So that interpretation is very, very important. I don't think the reader can get there with a calculator. They have to understand the context within which these measures operate, because sometimes just the size of the increase alone doesn't tell the story.
Yes. And I wonder if I want to put that in the background. So I do have something here. I don't know if you could see it, but it's like due to the likely small sample sizes, because some of these are going to be very small with certain racial ethnic groups, results by racial ethnic groups should be interpreted with caution, right? Like we could be talking about very few people. So I think maybe putting that earlier, I think could be helpful. I don't know your thoughts about that.
Well, I think that's particularly true when you're dealing with ratios. I'm limited here because I'm on a laptop and the size is very, very small, so I can't read it. But from reading the original report, I think they were calculating ratios, and that's comparing one segment of the population to another. And that's where the number in the population is so critical.
Right. Having the size,
Yeah.
the population size is
Yeah.
what you're saying. Right.
That's right.
Thank you. But it is, something that is most certainly on my mind. Like, can we make conclusions when we're talking about so few people? And just keeping that at the forefront. Yes, Ben.
Well, if I could raise just one more point, and it's related to the definition of the measure itself. When we say that something is positive, for example, the screen-in proportion of referrals that are actually screened in, we refer to that as positive, but we really don't know that that's really has a positive effect on children. Are we saying that more children who enter this, who are referred to the system and then end up with a subsequent investigation is actually positive? I mean, there are some of these things that I think we really have to wrestle with, because it may not be the case. Another example is 50% or roughly 50% reduction in the number of children in care. That can only be positive if we know what happens to the children who aren't served.
Absolutely.
Are they living under a bridge? God forbid, do they commit suicide? We don't know what happened to them. And so just putting an arrow about fewer children are being served in the system could be positive, but it also could be a very destructive trend. And we're going to have to somehow provide context for people to understand that.
I really appreciate those points. I think they're incredibly valid, because we don't know. We don't know if it's truly positive without that contextual data. And I think that needs to be made more clear in the report, that we can't just assume. And then it looks like your hand is raised. Oh, okay. But I'm going to make a note to myself here. So I want to capture that. Okay. So I'm going to keep us moving on. This is what we're looking at here. I indicated is mixed. So this is racial ethnic disparity ratios for community facility placements. And so these particular ratios were calculated to highlight disparities. So this is a ratio of 1, indicating that the group is equally likely to be placed in a community facility relative to the population as a whole. So over 1, more likely, less than 1, less likely. And then I really, in my summary, tried to focus on the differences between 2023 and 2024. I don't know if people need a couple moments to actually read the text. I'll allow for about a minute. Danielle.
So I might just be missing it, but could you put that disclaimer that you just stated in there where if it's higher than 1 or lower than 1, this is what it means versus 1 is indicating the group is equally likely to be placed in a community facility?
Yes. Yep. Yep. I think that's very helpful. Thank you for suggesting that. I see Dr. Levy.
Diane.
Diane, yes.
I said definitions to me just keep ringing through. So, does everybody know what the community facility is? Because is that a positive thing or is that a negative thing? It's for somebody like me who's not in the JR world, it would be helpful to have something like that spelled out a little bit.
Absolutely. Thank you. Barb.
That's exactly what I was going to say. I mean, community facility basically offers more freedom to a person who's been adjudicated of a crime. So I think we need to be really explicit about what it means that in lieu of detention, these folks are, allowed to live in a facility where they can come and go or.
That's very helpful. Thank you for pointing that out. Really appreciate the focus on definitions. I think it's critical for the report. So thank you both. So those are findings, summary. Any questions, concerns on this material?
That I will say in the summary, we're saying in 2024, Hispanic Latino individuals had a higher disparity, but it almost makes it sound like a negative, but it actually means with 1.20, they're more likely.
It's a positive, right?
It's a positive. Yeah.
They're actually exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that context needs to be there.
Yeah. The context
be up front and below. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'd actually focus on the context than the numbers, if that makes sense.
That's something that came through in a couple of these outcomes that the context is more important. The numbers are just you're losing the story.
Right.
When we're talking community facilities also, are we talking state-run community facilities for JR? Are we talking county? Because the majority of juvenile system sits in the county, right, until youth are adjudicated, and then they move into the state system. And so just as we're talking about, I'm assuming we're talking about anything that's under the state purview as opposed to because even if they end up in a community facility, they first have to go right now to either to a state-run facility and spend time there before they can enter a community facility. So and that may be weedy, but I just in the clarity, is it our state-run facilities or am I the only one that would wonder that?
No, I think it's critical. I think it's important.
Okay,
what are we talking about? So thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. And again, I'm really talking about context. Like it's, that's what we would like to see here, right? Get the trend, more youth being able to go to community facilities. The next performance indicator, I believe there's one more after this in this section, is racial and ethnic disparity ratios for discretionary parole placement. So here, the background is a ratio of 1 indicates that a group is equally likely to be granted discretionary parole relative to their proportion in the population of juvenile rehabilitation clients. Ratios greater than 1 indicate that a group is more likely to be placed on discretionary parole, while ratios less than 1 suggest that a group is less likely to be placed on discretionary parole. My understanding is that this is, and please correct me, that this is a positive thing. Yeah. So we, again, being really careful with the language.
So I would just say, again, it might be helpful to have a definition of what exactly is discretionary parole.
I think that's better. Mhm. Instead of making a judgment. Mhm.
And who's eligible for discretionary parole?
Thank you. And again, some of these, I think Ben's concern, not concern, well, yes, that some of these might be very small cell sizes is absolutely warranted here. Small samples. So you're going to notice that some of my recommendations, I would say most of them are very broad, like broad, right? And are most certainly need to be. I think there's legislation and there's context around this that are missing some of these recommendations, and this is where I'm really looking to you and your thoughts about what we want to say here. Currently, overall, for this particular outcome, we're saying that it's mixed based on the findings. We might say that the sample sizes are too small for us to make any meaningful conclusions. So, that's another way we can go. But this is the current I don't know if it's even a recommendation. I'm just reading it for context. The mixed findings across all 3 performance indicators could be due to institutional biases, cultural stereotypes, or perception of higher risks that affect decision making. Addressing these disparities should be a priority to ensure that decisions are made fairly and equitably across all racial and ethnic groups. Additionally, further exploration into the factors influencing these disparities could be critical for ensuring that confinement, placement, and parole decisions are made based on individualized assessments rather than group-based stereotypes. What do people think about that? Like, how I definitely wanted to give you something to respond to. Ruth.
Well, I think that second paragraph, does reflect a recommendation, but the first sentence really doesn't. It's just stating that they may face significant challenges.
Mm-hmm.
So I just think we need to be careful to however we phrase this, it needs to be a recommendation.
Thank you. Thank you for pointing that out. Any other thoughts about this or, what we could add? Ruth, your hand is still raised, but I don't know if that's just from before. Okay. So I do want to say that we proposed a break at 3, but I'm going to keep us going till 3:15. Just given how long the report is. I hope that's okay for people. So why don't we plan on going to 3:15 and then having a 10-minute break and then continuing? Okay, I'm going to keep us moving along. Okay, so now we're going back to some of these early learning indicators, which, where the report traditionally starts. So increase the number and proportion of children kindergarten ready as measured by the Washington Kindergarten Inventory of Developing Skills, WaKids assessment. And so what I was interested in looking at is the school year data from 2022 to 2023 versus the 2023 and 2024 school year data. And you can see that there's not much change, right? But there is an increase. That's a judgment, but there is an increase from 53% to about 58%. And then just some background, students are ready when they demonstrate readiness in all 6 areas of development and learning. These include cognitive, language, literacy, math, physical, and social emotional readiness. So just letting people know what we're talking about. I did call out that this is the highest rate of kindergarten readiness in the last decade. I was able to look at that. Ruth, yes.
So I just, I'm kind of stunned at what we have seen with the broader school population of, really declining scores, and that in early learning, it's gone up. It's really a pretty positive statement about the work the department is doing to really support higher quality childcare.
Yeah, thank you for providing that context.
I'll just say, but there is a big but coming in my mind about this data. It is going up, but the disparities are persisting. So I think we really need to call that out. And I think you get to that in the next.
Yes. Yes. And I am going to show us this right now. So what you're looking at right now is the exact same indicator, but split by race ethnicity. And some of the numbers overlap a little bit, but you can kind of see the different groups that we're looking at. And you can see that there most certainly we've got some groups down here. Black African American is right here. We see Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander. I don't know how large this group is, but we see that here. But there is quite a difference in terms of where different kids by race ethnicity are falling on this graph. Diane, I see your hand is raised. Oh, no problem. No problem at all. Yes, Senator Warnick.
So you can call me Judy.
Okay.
Which group, I'm having a hard time seeing the difference in the colors. The two or more races, where do they fit?
So they are blue and they are right. I don't know if you can see my mouse.
Yeah, okay.
This is them.
Okay, that makes sense. So who's the 35%? Is that the Native Hawaiian?
That's our Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander group.
Okay. I don't think we have but I don't know whether we have a lot in our state, but okay, thank you. That helps.
Absolutely. And I think just the small sample sizes needs to be called out here as well. Because we are making interpretations where there may not just be a lot of data there.
It would be kind of nice to know what the sample sizes are on some of these graphs. I don't know if I know sometimes you do have an N put in there, which I think is very helpful.
Yes. I think, I think there are rules that they wouldn't present data unless it was over a certain number, but I think even having that general, I think that would be helpful for me to understand, like, what are we talking about here? So let me make a note.
So is this WAKIDS data from childcare, or is this OSPI's kindergarten WAKIDS data?
This should be DCYF. No, I'm sorry. Thank you for saying something. This is OSPI, WAKIDS report card.
So is there anywhere we report out on the early learning WAKIDS data that we do within our early learning programs within DCYF? It would seem to me maybe that isn't important, but that we do that, the assessment in kindergarten is once, requirement is once within the first, I think, 7 weeks of school or so. And it's a requirement in our early learning programs. And just curious around, anyway, just wondering, I was like, wait a second, whose WAKIDS is it? And I know it's because I think everyone goes to kindergarten perhaps, and not everyone is in a pre-K, but anyway, okay, I just answered my own question. I hate when I do that publicly, but I just did that, so I did it publicly.
Okay, but just so I'm clear, Nicholas, if you can maybe put in the chat if this is coming from OSPI or OIA's website, I think that would be helpful for me. Or if someone knows could put that in the
Lois,
chat.
you've got your hand up.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Diane. Elisha, she actually answered the question for me. Thank you, though.
Great. Senator Wilson. on it. Okay, so we're seeing these differences. Okay, so there's a summary here. I don't know if people want to take a moment to look at the summary. Ruth, yes.
I'm sorry, can you go back up to the chart for a second?
Absolutely.
So are we able to make any observations about whether disparities, I mean, we are, whether disparities have increased or decreased?
So I think if you look at the lines in general, there is an upward trajectory. Especially if you are looking, which I've done throughout the report, on the 2 most recent years. So really directing your eye here to 2022, 2023, and 2023, 2024. I think we can say that. But there are most certainly differences among groups in terms of how ready they are.
I'm just wondering over time whether those differences are improving or not.
They sure look pretty parallel to me in
Yeah, they
general,
do.
but
They do.
which I think indicates that while all groups are improving, which is heartening, we still
Mhm.
don't see that catch-up improvement we'd like to see in the lower
Right.
tiers groups.
Right.
I think that is
I
a
withdraw
good
my
point.
question.
Yeah, no. Oh, but you yes, these are kind of relatively flat, right? Yeah.
What-
So
Well, I mean, I would point out that the gap between the group that's struggling the most was at 35% in 22-23, and the highest group was at 64.5. That's like almost 30% gap. If you look at the numbers for 23-24, the gap is roughly 25%. So there is some slight improvement between the young people struggling the most and those doing best, I guess is what I would say. So there is a slight improvement in the gap, or a reduction in the gap overall.
thank you for calling that out, Barb. So do we feel comfortable with this summary statement? I mean, maybe it's too, maybe we should focus bigger picture, right? Or focus kind of what Barb just did on the group that's at the lowest end of the continuum and those that are have the highest readiness, and maybe talk about that here in the summary.
I think it looks good.
Okay. And just so people know, I currently don't have my chat up. So if people are making comments in the chat, I am not ignoring you. You just, if you can come off mute and let me know, or raise your hand, that would be great. And so here are the recommendations as currently. Although many groups showed improvements in kindergarten readiness, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander, American Indian, Alaskan Native, and Hispanic Latino students continue to face disparities in readiness. Focused interventions and targeted support should be implemented for these groups to address the remaining gaps. Lois, I see your hand. You may be on mute still.
Yeah, thank you. I think one of the things that should be clear for someone else from the outside reading who may not know that WAKIDS, and it may be there, I might have missed it, but WAKIDS just reflects those children that are in ECAP programs. It doesn't include students in private or family homes, that type of thing. So it's not giving a clear picture of all of our children in Washington State.
Thank you.
So we need to have that disclaimer somewhere.
I think that was my question, Lois, that I believe this is OSPI data, not early learning WAKIDS. So WAKIDS is something that is part of the kindergarten readiness when kids get into kindergarten. So the data that's reflected is not about our Head Start or our ECAP kiddos that use Walk Kids as their ongoing assessment during their time, if that makes sense. That's where I was confused and where I asked a question I probably shouldn't have asked, because I wondered too, is this DCYF data or OSPI data? So I believe if it's OSPI data, that it would include all children who are going to our public kindergarten programs. Is that?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, and I don't believe it is, from what I remember, if for those, and Ruth can probably chime in here. Initially, Walk Kids was supposed to be that connection between a child's family, their pre-K and kindergarten, and have that triangle.
Well, they're
And
definitely, Walk Kids requires kindergarten teachers to connect with the childcare, but the measure is all kids coming into kindergarten are assessed on the 6 domains, and this is the score. So it's all kids.
So this is all kids. And let's make that really clear.
I think you should check that. I
Okay.
don't believe that is correct. So, and I don't believe every school district has adopted Walk Kids. So it'd be better
It's
to check if I'm
it's
wrong.
in the law. They all have to administer Walk Kids to all kids.
Okay, Ruth, thank you.
Yeah. What they, yeah.
Yes. Yes.
I do hear a dog. And I'm looking, it's about 3:15.
He's not here and I'm on a Zoom.
I think Bobby doesn't realize that.
Yes, he should be.
Hey, Bobby, you're not muted.
Note out there. I like I said, I'm on a Zoom and I'm thanks, but
Okay. So I'm looking at the time, it's 3:15, and we built in a 10-minute break for this entire meeting. So this is a great stopping point for me. And so why don't we plan on being back at 3:25 and continuing? So my camera will be off, but I will see you all at 3:25. Thank you so far. This has been very helpful. Okay, I'm noticing it's 3:25. Want to start welcoming people back. Hello. So just to give us a little bit of a time check, we have until 4:30 when public comment is starting. So we have a lot to get through, but I really appreciate the feedback. It's been absolutely excellent, as has some of the discussions back and forth, and I think the quality of the report is absolutely improving. So I'm really, really grateful for the conversation that we've been able to have and the suggestions. I still see some people off camera, so I'll just give it about a couple more seconds. Okay, I am going to jump in because of time. So I moved us to indicator 3, which is increase the proportion of children, outcome 3, increase the proportion of children in early learning programs that have achieved the level 3 or higher early achievers quality standard. So I'm going to provide some background here. Right, DCYF developed a way to estimate the number of children served through its new early learning data store. This new way of measuring this information does not contain data prior to 2023. So if we want to pull some historical data, that's something that I would need to know from the board if that would be meaningful. But some things I want to call to your attention, which I'm sure you're observing on the screen, is that the number of, we have right now, I'll just read the title, the estimated number and percent of children served by all types of providers by quality and state fiscal year, excuse me, So not yet rated. In 2023, we had about 58% who were not rated, and in 2024, we had about 59%. Looking at an under 3 rating, which is considered, I'll read the definition here. At levels 1 and 2, providers are participating in quality improvement through training and activities. And then also for when we look at the next line, facilities that are rated at levels 3 to 5 have achieved a quality level of excellence. So under 3, oh, yes. Well, I'll just finish that real fast. Under 3, we have 1.5% in 2023, and very similarly, we have 1.3% in 2024. And then 3 or above, we have 41% in 2023, and very similarly, 40% in 2024. Okay, Tom.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So I'm going to back up just a second. I've been sitting here thinking when we went on break. Lois Martin asked a question before we went on a break if on the walk kids thing, if kids, if school districts can opt out of this, and who's in, who's out. And as I got to thinking about it, I don't know that answer either, and the answer wasn't clear. So I'm just curious if we know the answer, if school district can opt out, and where the numbers come from, just so I have an understanding. So.
Yes. So I am going to, Ruth, go on. I'm sorry.
Well, unless the legislature changed the law, I was involved in WAKIDS when it passed the legislature, and maybe Claire can also add to this, and all school districts are required to participate.
Right.
So that would include even private schools, Ruth?
I can't answer that, but all public schools certainly are.
Yeah. Public education and kindergarten classrooms. So full day kindergarten and kindergarten classrooms use WAKIDS. The difference is the WAKIDS in the early learning space also spends a lot of time. They, do the WAKIDS assessment 4 times a year and all of that. In our early learning programs, if we're looking at the assessment, which is one part of it, that is done for all children that are in kindergarten classrooms in our public schools. And they do that one time as opposed to, that's why I asked kind of where it's done. So if it's the data is kindergarten data from OSPI, then it would be all of our children in our K-12 public education kindergarten classrooms. Oh, and it does include charter and public school, charter and public. And again, we may want to look at, does it include tribal and tribal compact schools as well?
I appreciate the question, Tom, and the information. I will be confirming, and providing a much more, a greater level of specificity.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because you're right, we didn't come to a conclusion on that. So I appreciate you raising that.
Sure. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you, Senator, and thank you, Ruth.
Yeah, thank you both. Okay, so I'm going to move us back to 3. And okay, so I went through the table.
My thing right here, Leish, is this whole issue up above about, and maybe it's just the way I read it, we're increasing the proportion of children in early learning programs that have achieved the level 3. It's not the children, it's the program. And maybe that's only me, but it's the program that's lived. We want kids who's in programs who have reached level 3. It's anyway, because it's about the program and the individuals and the adults in the system. It's not about where the children are. And in the title, in number 3, I just read that and I'm like, maybe that's only me. So I'll be quiet.
Sir, but it needs to be clear that we're really talking about providers. I mean, that's the point. So I appreciate that. I do appreciate that. Thank you. And maybe there's a way that I can focus on this and make it super clear.
But your number is children in your graph.
The number is children.
Yeah.
Okay. So these are some recommendations. These were just drafted. Of course, everything is for consideration. With just over half the children attending unrated programs, 59%, it is crucial to prioritize the evaluation and rating of these providers. Accelerating the process of rating providers will help ensure that more children are attending programs with recognized quality standards. Second, given the higher percentage of children served by unrated providers, targeted outreach efforts to families, especially those in underserved communities, could help raise awareness about the importance of high quality care. Additionally, support should be offered to help families navigate available provider options, thereby promoting access to higher rated providers. What are people's thoughts about that? Yes, Diane.
Oh, my mouse wasn't moving. Sorry. I find it intriguing that we don't have this based on ethnicity data too. Like, do we have any understanding of what racial breakdown and ethnicity breakdown it is in terms of kids being served? So I'm thinking in my area, for example, we have a large Latino population, and I suspect that there are a lot of kind of in-home caregivers who may not be rated. So I just question that.
Mm-hmm. By types of provider, right? That would change. Yeah, I will look into that. Absolutely. I think it's a really good point. I don't know if this is available by race, ethnicity. Ruth.
It also would be helpful to have by type of provider. I mean, are there more family home providers, after school child center?
We have that. That's available. Yes, I know that. Okay. Let's see. Okay, I'm going to keep us moving in the interest of time. Okay, 4, increase the available supply of licensed childcare in both childcare centers and family homes, including providers not receiving state subsidies. So we're looking at this here, and this is the number of licensed childcare providers by type. We're looking at 2018 to 2023. And then just a little bit of background, DCYF reports on licensed capacity of childcare providers and the number of licensed childcare providers annually. So this top line right here is our total. And then we're seeing family home provider above that. And then we're seeing child care center. And then down here we have school age only, which I believe is the type of provider. Please correct me if I'm wrong. And then they started tracking outdoor-based programs in 2021. So it's one of these questions where, is this a meaningful change, right? So if we look at 2022 and 2023, we see, it's what I would call small dips. And, I'm going to be moving away from the worst language and using like needs improvement, but this could also be no change.
Well, I don't think we should say no change. I think there has been a decrease.
Okay. I agree.
I mean, you're the statistician, Elisha, but I do think that there is a way to report with, whether it stays within the error percentage or, whether it's I don't even know the right words for it, but whether or not you're within the range of error.
The range of error. I know what you're referring
You know what
to.
I'm saying.
I think they may have also tested, and I've stayed away from this just for clarity, but this might be helpful in some areas like this, looking at differences, seeing if they're statistically different by group. And I kind of shied away from that for this report. But I'm open to that. Ruth.
Well, because centers serve many more children than individual family homes, I think the drop is significant in terms of number of children served. So I can't remember. I don't think we have a table that shows actually the number of children served. This is the number of providers.
I don't think we have number of children served.
And I think that might be helpful to see how many children are in centers, how many children in homes.
And the only ones we would know would be those that we're receiving subsidy for, because we don't have data on private pay individuals, so it wouldn't be a full picture, right, of
True.
actually.
Well, we have licensed care, the number of licensed slots.
Correct, okay.
Licensed centers receiving subsidy.
Mhm. Well, the centers have a certain number of licensed slots, but as Lois can tell you, that doesn't mean that's the number of children they serve.
Right.
There is a capacity statement mentioned in the findings about our capacity is decreasing slightly from 198,277 to 194,098, which does give you a little bit of a sense of the children
Right.
served.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for calling that out again. Yes.
Yeah.
But would we like to see a figure kind of showing children served for those that are receiving subsidies, those centers that are receiving subsidies?
I think it would be valuable, but I don't know what other people feel.
Lois, I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand. Hi.
Hi, no problem. So looking at the chart, it's showing the license capacity in childcare providers and the number of licensed. So it looks like that information, I'm assuming, is coming from Wall Compass that gets it from that, then pulls in that data from Merit. And if that's the case, then that would be all the providers in the state, and all of them do not accept subsidized families for whatever reason. And I'm sure some of them probably fall into that unrated piece that seems really high, but there are different reasons why people aren't rated, whether it's, because the curriculum won't work, because it's I don't know, whatever the reasons may be. So I'm just wondering if we do include that data, if we just report on subsidized children, will that skew the data, since this is the total number is based on all centers and not just subsidized children?
That's my understanding from WA Compass. But I don't think that, I think that could be made, first of all, as a first point, could be made more clear. But I see your point. Does it, I think if we do include it, it absolutely has to be made clear what we're looking at. And I definitely can make this more clear, like what exactly, what the WA Compass is pulling from, because I don't know. I will need to look that up. So thank you for sharing that. And you just let me know if I didn't capture what you were saying. So context, who was in WA Compass? Okay. So we're in available supply of licensed childcare in both child health centers and family homes. The next indicator is outcome, excuse me. Anything else on early learning before we switch over to child welfare? Okay, I'm seeing a no. Okay, 5, prevent child abuse and neglect. So this is, we're looking at the number and percent of screened in CPS intakes by type between 2019 and 2023. These data are from DCYF. They're from OIAA. Just wanted to double check the source there. So you can see not percentages, but just total ends here. And then you're going to look at the percentages for comparative purposes for CPS response, CPS investigation, and risk only. And I tried to include some definitions down here because I was not familiar with all of these terms. So, that is here. I'm happy to elevate it in a background section if that would be helpful, if people think that would be helpful. I do want to call your attention to CPS family assessment response. And just note that 15% are being screened into that, which I think is notable. It's going down a little bit, as you can see, from 2019, but we were at 16%, now we're at 15%. I see a raised hand. Ben.
So my question about the FAR cases is how many of them have gone through family assessment response and then are also showing up in the CPS re-referral rates? In other
have that.
words, oh, do you? Now, not
believe-
overall re-referral rates, but referrals from FAR, because FAR is an alternative response.
Yes.
And if they're going through FAR and then getting the traditional response right away, that's something that's very, very important. You see what I'm saying? I'm not talking about re-referral after closed cases. I'm
Okay.
talking about the FAR response, and then because FAR is voluntary, it's a very different process. It's way less intrusive. But if those 15% of those families that go through FAR, I'm making this number up, 12% of them end up coming through the front door with the regular CPS investigations. We would want to know what that overlapping population is.
Yeah, to make it meaningful, right?
Yeah.
I think I understand what you're saying with respect to the alternative response and how many are going through the
Yeah,
traditional.
that's a specific program as opposed to someone just getting a traditional response and then or coming back in with a re-referral after a reunification effort. So the FAR is supposed to prevent people from having to go through the rigors and the intrusiveness of a traditional investigation. So if they're getting both, that would indicate that FAR wasn't working the way that we had intended.
Right. And I do know that these numbers are not deduplicated, so we don't know.
So they're probably in that total, yeah.
Yeah.
So the other question, if I can ask just one more, is I'm unclear about the difference between cases that get a quote response from an investigation. I don't know what a response is. In a screened-in case, it gets a response, but not an investigation. Do we know what that means?
So this is the definition that I was able to come up with. And for some reason, this was harder to find, but I also see Danielle's hand raised. So Danielle, if you have something to add here, that would be awesome.
Not inherently, but I had a question related to the total screened-in intakes. And I think it probably goes along with the question that I have is a response might be that there's already an open CPS investigation. So then we are following up with a new intake and responding to that would kind of be what my gut is telling me. But I don't know if that's actually accurate or not.
Yeah, I can find out. I would like to know how response is different from investigation. And then Danielle, you also had a question that you mentioned that I'd love to hear.
So I think it's just around clarification of total screened-in intakes, because when you add the numbers up of where they get dispersed and you're saying there's not any duplicates, I mean, there's a chunk that's missing, right? So I was just curious if this is going back to cases that also have open CPS investigations or open CFWS where their dependency's already been established.
Well, I just want to clarify, my understanding of these data is that there are duplications here. So just, I don't know if you said that and I just maybe misheard. That's probably likely. But if you could just repeat your question again, that would be helpful. Because if I don't know, someone on the call might know, or it could be something I need to follow up with.
Yeah, so where it says intakes and the intakes that were screened in, it's the 132,000 plus. But we're not seeing, also please keep in mind, I'm a liberal arts major, not a math major. But the numbers adding up to where like they're screened in, but is this fully cases that are being opened for investigation? Or is this including cases where they've already been open and we're just getting a new intake that's being screened in and added and investigated along with the original open case?
I think I understand. Already open, or I think it's a great question. So thank you for that. So, and I will get a definition for you. For the report, sorry, I think it would be beneficial for the report. Pamela, I see your hand is raised.
Yeah, I was just wanting to have some clarification on why 2023 there was the 5,023 with the 4% for the CPS risk only, but then the other years there wasn't. So what does that mean entirely, and why there isn't numbers on the years before 2023?
Yeah, so that is a great question. So I think I wrote about it right here. So let's see. Or maybe that would be embarrassing. And I'm glad you asked about that, but let's just read about it. This category indicates that while not all sufficiency screening criteria were met, the information provided suggests that the child is at imminent risk of serious harm, but no maltreatment occurred. Data in this category first appeared in 2023 with 5,023 cases of the total intakes being categorized at CPS only. This may be a new classification or change in how cases are tracked. So that's my like why we are seeing the data for the first time, but I would like to know. So thank you for bringing that to our attention. Just to get that, let me make a note of that. Why only 2023?
While you're doing that, I might just, in the absence of time, just jump in and just say I have just a kind of global question about why this indicator is improved when we're looking at the percentage of cases requiring a full CPS response or investigation declined over time. It's kind of back to Ben's question. Do we really know that that's an improvement?
Right.
I hear you. Right, we don't. So yeah, context matters, and we don't have that information. Ruth.
So I think the risk only and the big question that we as an oversight board need to pay attention to is the law was changed dramatically to require a much higher threshold for the state to intervene. So you know, the whole focus is on keeping families together. And so how do we measure if that is resulting in families being able to stay together or in more child harm? And I think, you know, the CPS risk only, I think that was created when the law was passed.
Okay. That's good context, and I'll follow up, but thank you. I think I really appreciate you stepping back and like kind of reorienting like what are some of the big questions here. Thank you. And I see there's a comment in the chat, but feel free, I'm not tracking the chat, so feel free to share what that is. Okay. So exactly, is this a good thing, right? The percentage of cases requiring a full CPS response or investigation declined over time. This could reflect a trend toward more targeted intervention, family assessment response, like an alternative response, as Ben was saying, or risk-only cases. The next indicator where I'm seeing no change, and I want to call out that we did receive data recently from DCYF. We received the 2021 data. And so this table right here is percentage of families who had their family voluntary services case closed that experienced a subsequent screened-in CPS intake or placement of one or more children. So the case was closed, and then there was a subsequent screen-in. And in looking at the data, and just so you know, it's lagged quite a bit, and I did call out why this measure is lagged by 18 months to allow for a 12-month re-referral period, data stabilization, data analysis reporting. So we're looking at, if we do look at 2021 to 2022, you know, a change between 33% and 33%. So, my rating on this was no change. Okay, moving on to 6, reducing the number of children entering out-of-home care. So what you're seeing right now is number of children entering out-of-home care, 2017 to 2024. So this is pretty clear downward trajectory, downward slope. So 2024, we have 2,835 entering out-of-home care, which is still a decline from 3,302 in 2023. You know, we're going, yes, Danielle.
Sorry, so kind of going back to Ben's comment earlier about data and kind of things not necessarily being in line with each other. So is there any data that you're aware of that we could pull that discusses how many fatalities or near fatalities are happening during in-home dependencies where we're not removing them from care, like from their parents' care?
That OFCO might have that. I have not read, can someone speak to that? I unfortunately have not read the OFCO report that just came out 2 weeks ago or a week ago. Ruth?
I think Senator Wilson might have had an answer to your question,
Yeah,
but my,
I believe that, and I have not read the report as well, but I do know, again, in response to keeping families together, that I know I've been tracking implementation with DCYF, so they should be able, and I do believe have data broken out that way, Danielle, and if not, would be worthy of checking with Patrick at OFCO just to see kind of how that fits, because clearly, you know, there was it's an improvement, and it's the direction we want to go, and at the same time want to make sure that we're also making sure young children that are at risk are also making sure that they're safe and receiving service and support as well. So and yeah, so there may be, I just know that that's, for me, something I've been tracking, and DCYF has been able to respond to for me.
Thank
so
you,
my
Senator
question, sorry, my question was this, children entering out of home care. Is this both foster care and kinship care?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So I really appreciate, Danielle, your comment about looking at fatalities, because that allows us to start to unpack what some of these data might mean. And so thank you for raising that. And it sounds like that'll be relatively easy to there are ways to obtain that.
I might just say too that the OFCO report from the fatalities that they presented, I think it was in the summertime, did show an increase in fatalities and related to fentanyl and how that plays into the whole picture as well. So I think that that's an important, because whenever we talk about reducing the number of children entering out of home care, I always like to insert the word safely.
Yes.
Entering home care. I think that that's the comparison piece that we always need to add in when we talk about this graph personally.
Right. And I'm hesitant to put safely in the title because I don't know that that's the case here. So I agree, but I can't put it in the title. Yeah. Oh, Ben, yes.
Yeah, just very quickly, I don't know if it's important context or not, but the drop in foster care in Washington corresponds almost completely with the drop in foster care nationally. And during the same period of time, the entire country experienced that similar drop in foster care. The other thing is, I think Senator Wilson said this pretty clearly. The agency is required by federal law to track fatalities, and they also track near fatalities. But I think it's so super important to understand that the numbers are infinitesimal relative to the number of raw referrals that come into the system. It's a very, 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 very rare event to have a child fatality that was known to the agency. And there's also a very disturbing phenomenon that many child fatalities show up in emergency room data that have never been referred to the agency, large numbers. So the experts estimate that we only report about a third of them.
Okay. Wow. We only have, up to 1/3 of what is probably true. We're looking at up to 1/3 of children reported. Okay. Thank you for pointing that out. And I do think it's helpful to actually talk about the national landscape as well. I think a sense about that is useful. Ben, your hand is still raised. I don't know if there was an additional
My
comment.
apologies, I just can't remember to lower it. I'm sorry.
I do the same thing. I do the same thing. Okay. So lots of good questions here. Really appreciating them and great comments and context. So I did have a question for the board here. These are some of the recommendations that I came up with. Enhance preventative services and early interventions, give the steady decline in children entering out-of-home care. Given the steady decline in children entering out-of-home care, it is important to build on the success of family support services and prevention efforts. Maintain a joint focus on safety and reduction, review and refine child welfare policies and practices to ensure that they strike the right balance between reducing placements and maintaining child safety. There's safety right there. Training for caseworkers on early identification of risk factors, combined with clear guidelines for intervention, may help prevent children from entering care when it's avoidable. And then I have a comment about addressing systemic gaps here. Any thoughts on these?
You're going to hate me for this, but I just do have a wonder. I did 6109, the Child and Family Fentanyl Response Bill. And part of this is the definition, right, of the lethality, but the other was 12 buckets of support and resources for not only caseworkers and case managers, but also the judicial system, as well as a bunch of other things. And is there ever any time when we actually recommend to fund the very supports that, to fund those supports that we know would actually provide what families needed, and whether that's in the context, hopefully, of their homes, or if it's imminent danger in a safe place for a child, but also full of resources and supports, or is it only around the thing, or is it about funding also? Because we write stuff, but then it oftentimes does not get funded. It's a unfunded mandate, or there's only limited funds, or anyway, just as we move forward or move through that, just to wonder how we support that and support especially folks as we talk about within the agency doing the work. Anyway.
It's a good wonder. It's a good wonder. Thank you for that. Ruth, I see your hand.
Well, and you asked a question in your little box about should this section be more positive. I mean, I think the state really has implemented a stronger prevention intervention strategy that we should take notice of and complement, but indicate that, the resources to do that have got to be funded, or that ability is not going to exist. I mean, they're directly tied together.
I agree. I agree with what you said. Yeah, so I will call that out more. So thank you. Okay. Looking at the time here, it's 4:01. We'll be doing public comments in about 29 minutes. Okay, so now we're looking at the number of children. We were looking at entries up here. Now we're looking at the number of children in out-of-home care. Same trajectory, downward slope. Ruth. Oh, maybe yeah, it's probably up from before. Yeah. So just looking at some of the findings here, between 2023, we had 5,969. This is children, probably youth too, and out-of-home care. And again, this does include kinship care, and then to 4,998 in 2024. Yes, Danielle.
Yes, so in the recommendations where it says strengthening preventative and community-based services, so when we have an in-home dependency instead of an out-of-home dependency, we request in-home services, which in my opinion, I think could be more robust, and we could do a lot more work around building up those supports for families. I might
Okay.
have jumped ahead.
No, you did not. Nope, you did not at all. So making them more robust is that, if to summarize what you're saying, making these services.
Making them more robust, but we don't just rely on community-based services, we rely on in-home services as well. So instead of the families going out into the community to a community service provider, we bring them into the home.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you for calling that out. So wonderful to have these different perspectives and areas of expertise. It just makes the report that much more meaningful and hopefully impactful. Okay, so we're looking at percentage of children in care by race, ethnicity, last day of state fiscal year, and we're looking at data from 2017 to 2024. I'm going to put in a page break right here so we can see this a little bit more clearly. What's underneath? Insert page break, bring us here. Okay, so what we're looking at, if we're making the comparison between 2023 and 2024, is what I'm essentially calling no change for these various groups. I'm not seeing any questions or concerns. And then I did talk about just a little bit, like, sample sizes, right? So this is what I'm trying to get at here in the summary. Overall, the changes from 2023 to 2024 were minor. At the same time, the higher percentage of American Indian and Alaska Native children in care, 17%, is likely indicative of disproportionality for this group, assuming that it's a smaller group. But maybe that's going too far. Okay, and then I put recommendations. So I said the data in their current form do not allow us to understand whether and the extent to which disproportionalities by race, ethnicity exist for children in care. The board encourages DCYF to calculate disproportionality indices, so looking at the population number, looking at the sample, so we know about how many kids we're talking about, for this outcome to align with the agency's strategic priority of reducing disproportionality in child welfare. What do people think about that?
Lisha, that seems like maybe an inaccurate that high percentage of American Indian, Alaska Native children in care, 47% in 2024. Where is that correct? Because I thought it said 17%.
It's an error, and I did catch it. It's now 17 on the screen, 17%. I don't know if you can see that, but I also appreciate your careful review. That was a typo and unfortunate typo, but it should say 17 on the screen. It's 17%. So thank you for catching that. I'm going to keep us moving. Ben, yes.
Oh, just a quick question. If half of the children in foster care during this time period went home and the disproportionality rates didn't change, wouldn't you have expected that to be quite an opportunity to do something about disparities when half the population leaves?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And so we would have expected to see larger reductions in underserved communities if we were paying attention to it, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That's
and I'm not quite, I'd have to think about this a little bit, but it just dawned on me that when every other child who was in care before 2017 is now no longer in care, that tells you something about the effort necessary to make the exit from care uniform across various groups.
Mm-hmm.
So we probably don't have time to explore that, but I'll think about it a little bit more. But I think it's something that we need to think about.
Yeah, absolutely. And something I haven't thought about. So thank you for raising that. It's a good question. Moving on to, and I just appreciate you guys because I know this is long and a little bit tedious, but you're hanging in there with me and really appreciate it. Okay, 7, reduce length of stay for children and youth in out-of-home care. So I just want to point out the scale here. We're going between 420 and 560, so this may look more dramatic than it actually is. But I said improved. So length of stay in out-of-home care was reduced from 534 in 2021 to 476. Again, these data are lagged about 2 years. And then it's kind of similar as I said above, like, you know, should we call this out as more positive than it's currently written? Yes, Danielle.
Yeah, so I was just curious if there's any data that might show the relationship between the length of stay decreasing and then re-entry into care. Because I know there was some points made earlier throughout the report and just comments about concerns of if a case is with like FES or FRS or FAR, what have you, that it closes out and then those kids are coming back into care at a later point. So is there any correlation between length of stay decreasing, cases being closed faster, but then those kids coming back into care because barriers and deficiencies weren't actually addressed?
Right, right. I think that's a really important question. I would hope that's being tracked. I would imagine it is. I think that would be useful to include. Yeah. I mean, I think again, reentries, right? We're seeing this decline, but in what context, right? Are they coming right back? I think that's an excellent point. Okay. I'm bringing us to number 8. We have about 20 more minutes. Reducing maltreatment of youth while in out-of-home care. I was able to get some additional data on this, I think. So I changed it to no change. And what you're looking at here is the rate of victimization of children in out-of-home care per 100,000 days in care from 2017 to 2023. The federal target is 6.8. That's the orange line or lower. And these are the DCYF numbers up here. You do see a change of 0.4 between 2022 and 2023. So I consider that to be no change. Oh, Danielle, yes.
Yeah, so that 1,000 days, is that for all of the kids? We're just saying, hey, there's 5,000 kids in care. They've been in care X amount of days. Where does that 100,000 days in care come from? I guess is what I'm trying to get at.
So, can you ask that again, please?
Yes. So it says the rate of victimization of children in out-of-home care per 100,000 days in care. So we're talking 100,000 days, the totality of 2017 to 2023.
Oh, right. That's a good question.
So, but there's a process to that.
Oh, yeah, no worries. I'm not sure. I think it would be awesome to chat offline about this because I think it's an important question. And I don't think I'm fully grasping it. So I am going to make a note to follow up with you because I just think everything needs to be as clear as possible, especially when we're talking about recommendations. So I'm sorry that not getting the full picture there. But thank you for raising that.
This is kind of like a prevalence or an incident where you're looking at a number per 100,000 days. So and I think what's helpful to me is that you reflect what the national average is underneath it. So it gives us a little bit of a yardstick on how to look at.
Right. And we're above. Washington is above. Okay. Okay. Thank Thank you. Okay, so we are at number 9, outcome, license more foster homes than there are children in foster care. So we're looking at this bed to child ratio, last day of state fiscal year by region and overall. And I got to tell you, I looked for something more update than this. This is the background. In 2004, the state's welfare system set a goal of 2.0 licensed bed per child or youth in care. I was unable to find something more recent. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist. But I did kind of call out, the desire to move more towards kinship caregivers, and that the meaningfulness of this measure, for example, I said at the same time, licensing more foster homes per child in foster care is less meaningful as a measure given recent investments in kinship caregivers. So I put that there. But you do see some improvements and some people achieving that benchmark. Yes, Senator Wilson.
I was going to say too, our 11 to 15-year-olds are our greatest number of unaccompanied minors right now, and that is a housing issue. Young people being released out of spaces and no adults or places. They become our parking lot kids, if you will, and trying to figure out. So hopefully we'll see some of those changes, but yeah, because it is about what are the other places and spaces we can create. But clearly, even when we have foster care places, there are young people that we're still having a hard time housing in them. So yeah, just one.
It's really important. Thank you for raising that. I'm going quickly here. People just feel free to jump in. Okay, 10. Reduce the number of children who re-enter care within 12 months. Okay, so this is the percentage of children who re-enter care within 12 months of exit by state fiscal year. This number, the numbers I'm presenting here are calculated for internal DCYF purposes only. They recently have changed to using AFCAR data for the denominator, and there's quite an explanation here about why the numbers online are lower than this. And I might just, actually, I don't want to go into that level of detail. So I need to do some more thinking. I think it might make more sense to move to the measure that they're using now instead of going back to this more historical measure, even though it's a different story, right? Like, we're seeing things around 5%, 6% for the measure when we look online, and it's at this link right here compared to what we're seeing here. And there is a very long explanation that I have from the OIA team about why these numbers shouldn't be compared. However, I don't have a recommendation about where to hang my hat, so to speak.
So do you have, I mean, the critical question we've all been kind of circling around is the impact of the change in policy and how that, what's the outcome of that? Is it more kids coming back into care? And if I mean, this clearly indicates that it is, but if whatever you think or DCYF thinks is, well, you think is the most accurate measure, I think that's the critical number that we need to have.
Yeah, thank
How
you.
many kids are coming back to care?
Yeah, thank you. Diane.
Yeah, I'm not sure I would phrase it the way you phrased it, as the has increased by 1% from 2022 to 2023. That sounds like, not very big change, but when you think about the percentage changing, it's different than the whole number changing, right? So I would probably just say, it increased or something like that and not put the 1% in there. Does that make sense?
It does. It's the percentage, yes. Thank you for calling that out. Okay. I'm moving us to number 11. And this is increased stability of placements for children in out-of-home care. Right now, I'm also just checking the time, rate of placement moves per 1,000 days in care. We're looking at 2017 to 2023. These are rates at each year. And then I do want to point out that I'll just read it. The federal cohort period is 12 months and the state cohort period is 90 days. The state measure is typically higher because children tend to experience more placement moves earlier on. So we're going to see it higher than the federal measure because we're looking just at the 90-day mark, 90-day period. The federal target of 4 or fewer placements moves per 1,000 days in care. And that's the federal target right here, that gray line that you see at 4. So state, what we see here, again, it's helpful to see the entire figure. We see a decline from 7.59, 7.6 to 7.1. I, continually grapple with what's a meaningful change. And then here's my summary right here. Despite some improvement, the state movement rates were approximately 3 to 4 moves higher than the federal target. This indicates that while there has been progress in reducing placement moves, there remains a need for continued focus on achieving greater stability for children in care to meet the federal benchmark of less than 4 moves. Okay. So relative placement improved. So we're just seeing this great upward trend, looking at 2017 to 2024. So just wanting to highlight that here. I call this improved. Again, it's pretty steady. Great. Again, we can kind of complement this more because I think this is what we are wanting to see. Okay, so here we're looking at total count of placement exceptions, individual night stays per year. So I'm going to provide a little bit of background because I think this is helpful. So this figure shows the total count of placement exceptions, which are defined as individual night stays that fall outside standard placement protocols. These include night-to-night licensed foster homes, hotels, and leased facilities operated by DCYF, and they are used when no other placement that can meet the child's needs are available. Housing children in hotels and temporary facilities is disruptive for children and often traumatic. These placements also contribute to circumstances that may endanger youth, DCYF staff, and other professionals, and that's cited right there. So between 2023 and 2024, there's quite a drop. I don't know if you can see the bar chart there. So the overall indicator was improved. And it was it's quite noticeable. And then this is from OFCO. That's the data source. That's very timely that they, provided us with that about a week ago. So it's OFCO data. We have about 9 minutes before public comment. Number 12, develop strategies to show foster and kinship care families that their service and involvement are valued by DCYF, including consulting them on future child placements. So this is my story here that I think you see pretty clearly in the data. This is a survey. This is the caregiver survey. And there's some information about it here. It's conducted by DSHS. And what my interpretation of this is that you see kinship caregivers improvements in their ratings of satisfaction across these areas, and you're not seeing those that same uptick for foster parents, and that's overall what the pictures show here. And so I'm always a little hesitant to present item by item data because it's like we're giving a lot of weight to one question, right? But this is what has been historically done in this report, and we could always decide if that makes sense. But right here, you're looking at, are you treated like part of a team? Yellow being, I mean, not yellow, orange being kinship caregivers. And they only started tracking kinship caregivers in 2019. That's why you have that starting there. And foster parents, they started the survey back at least 2017. It could be even further back than that. But you're going to see approximately similar.
The only thing that just says to me is, you know, our whole goal was to have it looks, you know, that could be seen as improved, or I don't think it's necessarily worse. I guess, is it because those children, instead of going into foster care, went into kinship care, which keeps them unified with families? Or is it because, you know, so I think those together don't necessarily measure the same thing at all and may give a very different picture. And I know as families were able to reunify, there are those that feel like they've had less access to fostering or whatever. I just guess I'm wondering though, is that a correlation between those two, or are they two things that it's, again, what does worse mean?
Yeah, what does it mean? Exactly. Yeah. Because more, right, the context is so critical. Katie.
I have a question I would like to propose or throw out to the team. And it's about wording and whether we want to use the word foster parent or foster caregiver. I noticed down in the background, it's really relating to everyone as a caregiver and not calling out foster parents and kinship. So I know the state has been working to kind of move away from foster parent and more towards foster caregiver to be inclusive, but would like to throw it out for consideration for everyone.
I think it's a great question. I am interested in what people have thought specifically related to that first. What thoughts do people have about language? Okay, Tom.
Thank you. As a former foster parent, I'm really good with foster parent, and because that's really the role you're playing. And most of the foster parents I know would probably agree with me. So,
Okay, thank you. Other thoughts? You can just come off mute.
Yeah, this is Pamela. I would say like really it just depends on who the foster parent or foster caregiver is, because there are times where that has been brought up in negotiated rule meeting tables where it's like, do we say foster parent or foster caregiver here? Really we just kind of essentially ask the youth on what they think. So I think, I don't know, it's really just depends.
Makes sense. Really, like what's their perspective, right? Absolutely, for the kiddo, the child or youth. Thank you for sharing that.
Can you mention what the response rate is? I read in the fine print here that it's in another table.
Yeah, it's ridiculously high. I mean,
Is
and they
it?
didn't break it out like by, so here it is down here. They didn't, or maybe I was able to find a way to break it out, but like they just have kinship and foster together. But I mean, I don't even know how they get these numbers. So, I mean, I'm impressed. That's what I'm trying to say. I'm impressed.
Yeah, and the response rate's in the 90s. Yeah, that's pretty amazing. And they weren't paid or given any incentives?
I don't know. I would imagine you would think that they were paid or given some sort of incentive. But I can reach out and find out because they're quite good.
Yeah, yeah, they really are. Astoundingly so.
Okay, so we have about 4 minutes, and I just want to make Nicholas, if you could just jot that down about I know you're taking notes right now about follow-up related to any incentives for participation in the caregiver survey. That would be great. Okay. And then this is another question here, also from the survey. But just, I mean, big picture, it's pretty high. you know, and it's consistently pretty high. And I just think I want to call that out. I mean, I think I personally can get lost in the numbers, but like, look at, these are very high percentages of people feeling like they're being treated with respect and feeling that licensing staff are knowledgeable about the process. Okay, and we were just talking about response rates. Okay, so in our next 3 minutes, I'm just going to maybe we'll leave on this. Well, So increase family reunification by raising the number of children and youth who are reunified with their family of origin. And we will be changing the scale here. Just note it starts at 57% and goes to 67%. So these numbers are really looking like very different when they really are not very different. You know, so just want to call your attention to that. That's going to be changed. But basically, I mean, a change of 3%. Well, there's a 3%. I won't judge it. There's a 3% change here. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, given that it's 2 minutes to public comment. And I think something that would be useful is to really be responsive to statute in terms of when this goes to the governor's office. I'd love to have the opportunity to work with just a few folks who volunteer to kind of get through the report. And then of course it would be sent out to everyone as a whole for approval. So if you are so inclined to do maybe a one-time volunteer session with me, I'd be very grateful for that.
Elisha, I have 3 people signed up for public comment. So my question back to you is, I suspect that once we finish with public comment, we may have a little bit more time. Do you want to go back to this, or do you want to, what would you like to do?
I would like to continue. If people can hang in there with me, I would really appreciate that.
I always feel a little bit bad for JR because they're at the end of the report and we're always a little brain dead by the time we get to those performance measures. So I think if we can push through and look at that section, it would probably be important.
Great. Yeah, let's prioritize that. Thank you. And again, thanks to everyone for their really thoughtful, good questions that a lot of which I'm not able to answer, but so important for really understanding what the data mean. So thank you.
Okay, well, why don't we go ahead and get to the public comment. I have a new blurb that we're reading in before the public comment for everyone. And today we have 3 individuals signed up for public comment. The DCYF Oversight Board operates under state law, which outlines its authority and responsibilities. Specifically, the board is responsible for monitoring DCYF's progress towards achieving outcome measures, ensuring DCYF's compliance with applicable laws and policies, overseeing DCYF's performance and policies, and offering advice and input to DCYF, the legislature, and the governor. While the board may consider information brought to its attention as part of its general oversight and monitoring role, it does not have the authority to investigate, direct, or alter DCYF's decisions in individual cases. Additionally, during public comment periods, neither the board nor the meeting presenters can respond to comments beyond a simple acknowledgement. To respect individuals who have sensitive stories to share or wish to discuss details of individual cases, we'd like to remind you that the board is subject to the Open Public Meetings Act. This means our meetings are open to the public, recorded, posted on the Oversight Board's website, and live streamed on TVW. Written public comments submitted in advance have been sent to the board members. I don't think we had any this time around. To ensure that everybody has an opportunity to speak, please try to limit your comments to 2 to 3 minutes. Thank you. Okay, and with that, I will ask for Shayna Richard, who's my first one on my list.
Am I unmuted?
Yes, we can hear you, Shayna.
I just want to make sure I did submit a public comment and I submitted it on the 10th. So I want to make sure that it was sent to all of you.
It was, I can say that it was not sent around, so I don't know. Nicholas, do you know if we got something or?
Can you hear me? Sorry. You had sent something, but you just said you were signing up for it. I didn't know, you had not mentioned it was submitted for written comment. So I did not submit it for written comment, but I can send it out post.
Thank you. I'll make sure to clarify that next time. Thank you, Nicholas.
No problem.
I appreciate that. Okay, I will begin. Thank you so much. So thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today on behalf of Oakley Carlson, a young child who is deeply failed by the very system meant to protect her. My name is Shana Richard, and I am the founder of Light the Way Missing Persons Advocacy Project. For over 2 years, my organization has led a weekly call and email campaign to Governor Inslee on Oakley's behalf. We repeatedly requested a secondary independent agency review of her Washington State Department of Children, Youth, and Families case. When Governor Inslee finally responded, he cited that the Office of the Family and Children's Ombuds found that DCYF's actions complied with court orders, state and federal laws, and agency policies. However, his response left us deeply concerned. It seemed to dismiss the serious issues we have raised, specifically the lack of transparency by investigator Patrick Dowd during his interview with Jamie Jo Hiles, Oakley's foster mother, and the repeated documented disregard by Washington DCYF social workers for the calls and emails raising alarms about Oakley's safety. The facts surrounding Oakley's case are devastating and undeniable. Washington DCYF failed Oakley Carlson. Today, we respectfully ask for your support in urging Governor Inslee before he leaves office to conduct an immediate secondary independent agency review of Oakley's DCYF case. Our online petition has garnered over 7,000 signatures in support of this initiative, highlighting the broad public demand for accountability and change. Oakley is a 7-year-old girl from Oakville, Washington, who was last credibly seen on February 10th, 2021. Her absence went unnoticed until December 6, 2021, 10 months later, when a welfare check was conducted following a troubling series of events. Her parents, Jordan Bowers and Andrew Carlson, were taken into custody during this welfare check, but provided no credible information about her whereabouts. While initial charges of first-degree manslaughter were later dropped due to insufficient evidence, Bowers and Carlson were eventually convicted of child endangerment for exposing Oakley siblings to methamphetamine. Andrew Carlson is now free, while Jordan Bowers remains incarcerated on unrelated charges, but both parents continue to refuse to cooperate with law enforcement regarding Oakley's disappearance. From the ages of 7 months to 3 years old, Oakley was placed in a safe, nurturing foster home with Jamie Jo and Eric Hiles, who tirelessly advocated for her welfare, even after she was returned to her biological parents. Along with concerned community members, they raised multiple safety concerns to Washington DCYF, yet they were repeatedly dismissed by social workers Angela Freese and Supervisor Catherine Eddy. According to court documents, while in the care of her biological parents, Oakley endured starvation, physical abuse, and she was confined to a cell as punishment. Between 2013 and 2021, Washington DCYF received 11 intake calls about the Bauer-Carlson household for issues ranging from domestic violence, drug abuse, physical abuse, and medical neglect. 8 of those calls were screened in for investigation. In January of 2021, Washington DCYF received reports of Oakley having scratches and bruising on her face. Yet even when Bowers and Carlson refused to cooperate with DCYF investigators, Oakley remained in their custody. In November 2021, just a month before she was discovered missing, 3 separate calls were made to DCYF over 2 days regarding a fire in the family home, with reports that the family continued to reside there despite warnings of unsafe living conditions. Shockingly, these 3 calls were screened out. Oakley's suffering and disappearance demand a comprehensive review and accountability for the blatant disregard shown by Washington DCYF and its social workers. As her advocates, we urge you to support this call for an independent agency review to ensure that Oakley's story brings about the change necessary to protect other vulnerable children. Moving forward, if Governor Inslee continues to stand on the side of inaction, we will not be deterred. We will keep circulating this petition, engage with the incoming governor, and urge legislators like you to enact laws that protect children from abuse. We are prepared to return to these meetings repeatedly. We've been here since March of 2022, advocating for meaningful action on behalf of Oakley Carlson until real change is achieved. Thank you for listening and for your consideration of this vital issue.
Thank you so much. Appreciate your comments. I have Phoenix Lambert as the next speaker.
Hi, thank you for letting me speak. I'm here in support of Oakley Carlson. I imagine everyone here knows who she is by now, but for anyone who doesn't, I will recap. Oakley Lynn Carlson is a now 7-year-old girl from Oakville, Washington, whose last credible sighting was February the 10th, 2021. Oakley loved to read, to dance, telling jokes, and was a big fan of Disney films. She was smart, loving, and intelligent. Oakley lived with Jamie, Joe, and Eric Howes from when she was only a baby until just before her 3rd birthday. She was abruptly removed from the only parent she ever knew on November the 29th, 2020, and left in a house of horrors to endure starvation, physical abuse, and neglect. Washington Department of Children, Youth and Family Services' role was to make sure that Oakley was in a safe environment, to promote her safety and well-being, and to advocate for her and act in her best interests. There were failures to do so while Oakley was under their care and living with the Hiles. There were failures to do so after her reunification with her biological parents, Andrew Carlson and Jordan Bowers, and there were failures to do so upon her being reported missing. They failed Oakley. Concerns raised by Jamie Joe and Eric Kyles and other community members were ignored, played down, and belittled, and several opportunities to protect Oakley from severe abuse and neglect were missed, such as the opening and then closing of a DCYF case without physically seeing Oakley between January and March 2021. I'm confident that everyone in attendance here today cares about children and wants to help them. I'm sure for many of you, it's why you got into this work in the first place. I ask you to continue to care about children, to care about Oakley, and to ask Governor Inslee to conduct a secondary outside review of Oakley's Washington DCYF case. What happened to Oakley was avoidable. Please do what you know is right and help to prevent what happened to Oakley happening to any other children. Thank you.
Thank you, Phoenix. We appreciate you coming in and sharing your comments with us. I have one more. Sylvia Alexander signed up. I don't see her out there, Nicholas.
No, I do not see them online.
Okay, then I think that ends our public comment portion for today. Thank you, everybody.
Okay. I'm just looking at the time. It's about 4:40, and I know it's been a long meeting, but I did receive a response from Patrick Dowd about the relationship between the declines in entering care and fatalities, and I'm going to share my screen and share his write-up. So here we go. Okay. So I'm going to make that large. Okay, and I'll just read it out loud. Okay, quick response regarding Ben's question about any relation between the drop in children entering care and an increase in child fatalities and near fatalities. OFCO's 2024 Child Fatality and Near Fatality Report describes critical incidents during the 2023 calendar year. Critical incidents, child fatalities, and near fatalities related to child maltreatment increased from 74 in 2022 to 102 in 2023. Of these critical incidents, 42 qualified for executive reviews in 2020, and 49 qualified for executive review in 2023. And the underlining is mine. I just want to be super clear. OFCO's report did not conclude that the increase in child fatalities and near fatalities was specifically due to fewer children being placed in state care. While this may be a factor, other issues such as the fentanyl crisis also driving these numbers. Not sure if DCYF has done a deeper dive analysis on this, as it will require reviewing individual cases to determine if there's a factual basis to seek removal and court intervention. Let me know if you want to continue this conversation. So I thought that was particularly helpful. So I want to really thank Patrick for being watching our meeting and providing real-time information to us. It's really appreciated. I'm going to take us back to the report. And just keeping in mind Diane's suggestion that we don't leave out our JR youth who are at the end of the report. I think we'll just stick with 13 since we're on 13, and then we'll move to some JR sections. Okay, so this is increase in family reunifications by raising the number of children, youth who are reunified with their family of origin. This is percentage of total exits that are reunifications each year from 2017 to 2024. Again, scale will be changed, so this won't look so dramatic. But there was a decrease between a 64% in 2023 to 61% in 2024. And if people weren't here at the beginning of the meeting, the language worse will be changed throughout the report to be needs improvement. So just want to call that out. This is a very complicated table that we tried to make less complicated. And in the interest of time, I'm gonna move past it. But just I'm noting that I stopped on page 34. Okay. So I'm going to scroll. Okay. So this is 14, outcome 14. In collaboration with county juvenile justice programs, improve adolescent outcomes, including reducing multi-system involvement and homelessness, increase school graduation rates, and successful transitions to adulthood for youth involved in the child welfare and juvenile justice system. So this is JR and foster care. And this is the overall indicator is reduce homelessness. And we're looking at the percentage of foster care and JR youth and young adults who are homeless 12 months after system exit. We were able to get the data for 2022, so that has been added here. And if we look at the difference between 2021 and 2022, we see 15 to 16% difference in youth who were homeless 12 months after system exit for youth who were in foster care. And then we see for youth who were in JR facilities, 20% to 18% in 2022. I unfortunately do not have sample sizes for this table. We really tried to look at this broken out by age because it's really markedly different when you look at the younger in ages versus the older ages. And we just as a heads up, this is changing here based on the 2022 data. That's why I've made these changes here. But we do have the data related to homelessness 12 months after exit for those youth who were JR involved. We were not provided those data for homeless youth, and I can talk about the age difference here. But Ruth, I see your hand.
Could you just make the screen a little bigger? I'm going blind.
Yes, thank you for, yeah, let's do that.
Thank
How's
you.
that? Oh, yeah, because you haven't seen these, right? And I want you to be able to participate. Okay, so basically for the JR youth, in 2022, 13% of the youth, so we're talking about 12 to 17-year-olds, and 22% of young adults, that's 18 to 24-year-olds who exited JR were homeless within 12 months after system exit. So you're seeing, quite a difference between the 12 to 17-year-olds and those young people who are older. And so I just wanted to call that out because that's pretty marked and most certainly struck me. And then, as I mentioned, we haven't been able to get comparable rates for foster care split by age. So this is child welfare, so I apologize, but I'm going to keep going. I think this next indicator is worth discussing. Just going to insert a page break so we can all see this on the same page. Okay, and excuse me for one moment while I bump this up, just doing a little housekeeping here. There we go. So what we are looking at here, what I'm trying to show you here, and what I will be showing you momentarily. Well, let's just keep moving. Okay, so this is for your graduation rates for JR students enrolled in institutional education at Echo Glen and Green Hill. We did look up this information on the OSPI website for community facilities, but those data essentially were suppressed for all 8 of the community facilities, or they had cell sizes that were too small, so were not reported. So we only have this information from OSPI for Echo Glen and for Green Hill. And you can see that between 2021 and 2022, the school year, we had less than 30% graduating from Echo Glen, and as you would expect, 70% dropping out. And then in 2022, 2023, we had less than 25% graduating, and correspondingly, that means 75% dropped out. So I do not have national data to compare this to, but I did find it striking before I go over Green Hill that we don't really have data for the community facilities, and maybe because it's too small, right? And they're not offering those programs potentially. But looking at Green Hill, we saw that in 2021, 2022, 14% graduated, and about 31% dropped out. And then for 2022, 2023, we had about 9%, so a decrease there, graduating, and 34% dropping out. Yes.
So this is the weird space where there has been a task force on institutional ed, and this will be the 2nd year it's been meeting, but it sits in K-12, not over in human services, where the reports from DCYF would show the work. And so while the data is correct, what we may want to do is make sure that we've got any kind of information you may need from the K-12 side, and Rep. Callan and I co-chair that institutional ed task force. So as we think about this, as you move forward, anything that I can do to help out with kind of figuring out how we fill the gap or fill the hole would be happy to support, because we do have a large group that's part of the task force and has been collecting information and coming up with new systems as we think about how we're delivering services and aligning so that young people don't lose time and lose seat, regardless of whether they're in the juvenile system, which sits in the county, or whether they're in the state system, which sits with us. So
thank you
yeah,
for offering that.
Yeah,
I'm most certainly interested in more current data and more comprehensive data, because we are most certainly limited here. Nicholas, I see your hand is raised. But it looks like you might be on mute.
I didn't mean to raise my hand, sorry.
Oh, no problem. No problem. Sorry to cut you off, Senator Wilson. I just, okay. So I think the lack of data here is also a part of this story, but maybe that will change once I collaborate with Senator Wilson and get more data. So, so what we're seeing here, we've got 9 minutes, and I think we can finish this really quickly. Okay, so this is successful transitions to adulthood. So this is percentage of young adults age, and I'm going to get rid of these terrible dots for people. There you go. Percentage of young adults ages 18 and older released from JR facilities who find employment 1 year post-release by state fiscal year. And we have the most current data for 2022. So looking at the data, we're seeing an overall here an upward trend from, in 2020 of 59% to 6. Oh, that's not true. Sorry, it's been late in the day. So from 2021, we have 68%, and then in 2022, we have 60% who are able to find employment within 1 year after being released from a JR facility. And then this is something I really wanted to make the board aware of, is that in past reports, there's been other indicators of successful transitions into adulthood for foster care involved youth and youth who were involved in JR. And I just want to be, some of those items include percent employed and median earnings. And then there was a report by Education Research and Data Center that provided some of this information, but that is quite an old report and it was never updated. So this section lacks a lot of there, right? So I just want to make sure, I just feel the need to call that out because it's pretty skinny. Oh. Okay. And this is 15, reduce future demand for mental health and substance use disorder treatment for youth involved in child welfare and juvenile justice. And we're looking at average number of dialectical behavioral therapy individual sessions, so DBTs, and this is the individual sessions, and skill groups, this is groups over here, attended per month by JR facility residents, and it's split by race, ethnicity. And this is just 2024. Again, I think the key thing to remember here is there might be really small sample sizes here. We don't know that, so it's always a little treacherous to make conclusions when we might be talking about very few individuals. But just overall, we can see that American Indian, Alaska Native youth were able to attend the most individual group sessions, 2.8. And with respect to group sessions, they were also able to attend the most group sessions. And I think what might be the larger point here, because again, I think we can get lost in the numbers, is that, and I'm looking at our time, and this will be our last figure, is that 4 is recommended. So the JR standard is for residents to attend 4 sessions of each type, and none of these groups are hitting 4, and that's really the bottom line to me here. So that's really kind of probably what I will play up here, and maybe less of a focus on the numbers. There, I do want to direct your attention. Well, I think we're gonna. I don't want to go up to the end. I do think I did get some volunteers, and I'm gonna basically, because I want to leave time for a closing, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen, but I just want to thank folks who volunteered. I saw Ruth volunteered, and Lois volunteered, and Tom volunteered, and there may be someone else in the chat that I missed, but really appreciate you all for doing that. And thank you all for going through this report. I know it's probably one of the most dreaded meetings of the year, but it's so important, and your feedback was excellent, and I just feel really lucky to work with each of you.
Well, I want to thank you, because what a way to step into a role and have this in front of you, and really it's like an access database. Somebody else created it and now you're ready. I mean, you're in the position of having to see it through. So my hope is we get this done, and then you can put your full signature stamp on things as we move forward, and it may be an easier walk for you. It's hard to walk into someone else's body of work. So just incredibly appreciative for all the pre-work you all did, and Nicholas as well, and for the conversations today, because the input is really what makes this a living document. And I also will say I'm just always pleased to see an executive summary, because I know others like myself, that's probably the first place we go, and then we dig deeper in areas that we have more questions about. So really want to thank you, and make sure that people know that all the input you saw being, hastily and fast put in the system is going to be incorporated, and really appreciative of folks that did step up and and agree to potentially meet another time to finish the group work, if you will, and then we all will be able to look at a final document and put our stamp of approval on that and make sure that we all are comfortable and confident with the body of work that's going to leave the oversight office. And again, next Thursday, the 21st, I think, is the due date. So we will be seeing a rather quick turnaround. And if things are important to you, look in your email and be ready to provide input and give that back so that these guys can get this off of their to-do list. Also really just deep appreciation and thanks for both Marion and Pamela for sticking around. What a first meeting to walk in on. So you're still here. That gives me hope, and hopefully it gives everyone else hope. And this will certainly not give you a flavor of how things move forward, but once a year, I know this is an important meeting that we have together. So just want to really thank everyone and know here we go. Session starts January 13th, FYI. Bills start going into the proverbial hopper on December 3rd. So if you're interested in the things you'll see moving forward, that's kind of when things will start rolling out for both the House and the Senate. And I know I'll be on the floor and in Olympia, as will my colleagues here, and always happy to visit and see anybody, any one of you, if you come to Olympia while we're in session. I know that's my door's always open, and I'm certain I can't speak for Rep. Dent or Senator Warnick, but I believe they are the same as me. So really appreciate your time today, and wondering if there's anything else for the good of the order. And if not, 4:58, 2 minutes. We will give back to you, well-deserved. Again, thanks so much, and we will be seeing you in our next meeting.
Thank you, Senator.
everyone.
Thank you,
Thank
Mike,
you,
for all your
y'all.
hard work.
Take care. We'll see you in
Thank you.
Olympia.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye.
Thanks so much,
Bye.
everyone.